In the early 5th century BCE, the ancient world stood trembling as the Persian Empire. The greatest superpower humanity had ever known expanded westward with terrifying certainty, swallowing kingdoms, crushing armies, and enforcing submission. Through sheer scale and fear, while Greece, a land of small, quarrelsome city-states, seemed hopelessly unprepared to resist such an unstoppable force. Divided by politics, weakened by rivalry, and lacking the manpower and resources to survive a full imperial invasion. Yet history would remember that Greece endured not because it was stronger, but because it dared to take one insane gamble when surrender appeared to be the only rational choice. The Persians came not as raiders seeking plunder, but as conquerors seeking obedience, first under King Darius and later under his son Xerxes, whose ambition was nothing less than total domination, commanding massive armies supported by endless wealth and the largest navy the world had ever seen, and as Persian envoys demanded submission. Many Greek cities bowed without resistance, convinced that defiance meant extinction. But Athens chose a path no one expected, guided by Themistocles, a man without royal blood or legendary status, yet gifted with extraordinary political instinct, who understood a harsh truth others refused to accept, that Greece could never defeat Persia on land because the Persian army was too vast, too disciplined, and too well supplied, and that fighting Persia on its own terms would guarantee annihilation. So instead of strengthening walls or raising more hoplites, Themistocles proposed a radical vision that shocked the Athenian people. The future of Greece did not lie in stone, fortifications, or traditional armies, but on the open sea. And he persuaded Athens to invest its newfound silver wealth into building over 200 triremes, sleek and deadly warships that transformed ordinary citizens into sailors and turned Athens into a naval power overnight. A decision that demanded enormous sacrifice because it meant abandoning centuries of military tradition, placing faith in wooden ships instead of solid walls, and accepting the unthinkable possibility that the city itself might have to be sacrificed. A gamble many saw as reckless madness. Yet when Xerxes launched his colossal invasion in 480 BCE, crossing into Greece like a living storm, flattening resistance and advancing relentlessly south after the doomed stand at Thermopylae, Athens stood exposed and vulnerable in his path, and in that moment, Themistocles forced the ultimate test of his strategy by ordering a complete evacuation of the city, sending its entire population, men, women, children, and elder Zeeks, the sea to safety, leaving behind empty streets, silent temples, and abandoned homes. And soon Persian forces marched into Athens and burned it to the ground, destroying sacred monuments and reducing the city to ashes. An act that seemed to confirm Greece's defeat and Persia's total victory, yet this apparent catastrophe was the final piece of the trap, because Themistocles had lured the Persian navy into the narrow straits of Salamis, a confined waterway where their overwhelming numbers became a deadly disadvantage, as the Persian fleet, designed for open seas and grand formations, struggled to maneuver in the cramped space, while Greek triremes, lighter, faster, and expertly handled by crews fighting for their families and homeland, struck with ruthless precision. And as dawn broke, Persian commanders advanced confidently, believing the Greeks cornered and desperate. Unaware they had sailed into a carefully prepared killing zone where confusion spread, ships collided, orders failed, and panic erupted, turning the strait into a chaotic battlefield of splintering hulls, screaming sailors, and sinking vessels. As Greek ships rammed enemy triremes, shattered oars, boarded decks, and cut down crews in brutal close combat, while Xerxes himself watched from a nearby hill as his once invincible navy was systematically destroyed before his eyes, losing hundreds of ships in a single catastrophic day, defeat so severe that it shattered Persian naval dominance and changed the course of the war entirely. Because without control of the sea, the massive Persian army could no longer be supplied or reinforced, forcing Xerxes to retreat with much of his force and leaving his remaining troops isolated and vulnerable, ending Persia's dream of conquering Greece and proving that victory does not always belong to the strongest or the most numerous, but to those willing to think differently, sacrifice deeply, and risk everything when no safe options remain, preserving Greek independence, protecting the fragile experiment of Athenian democracy, and safeguarding the ideas of philosophy, science, and political thought that would later shape the modern world. All because one city chose ships over walls, courage over fear, evacuation over surrender, and an insane gamble over certain destruction.